We're on?
Yep.
We're on. Okay. Well, unlike 2 weeks ago, who remembers what was happening 2 weeks ago on Friday?
Snow.
Snow. Yes. Okay. Well, dare I say spring has come? Um,
The daffodils think so.
the daffodil, my snowdrops
Um,
are fine.
what else did
Oh.
last night I was driving and there were tons of frogs on the
Really?
road. Yes. Yes. Tons of them, hopping around.
Pop, pop.
Yeah.
Squish, squish.
Oh, it's squishy.
Now I haven't, see, I live up on the hill, a little over 2,240 feet. You live where? Down in the valley?
Yes.
Probably 1,500
Mhm.
feet. So spring comes to Wellsville or Hornell probably almost a week sooner than up here on the hill, because I haven't heard the peepers yet.
Yeah, I hadn't heard them, but last night we were driving home and my headlights kept hitting them just as my
Yes,
car was
yes.
probably squishing.
We need to change that old adage about why does the chicken cross the road?
Yeah, why does the frog cross the
Hop across the road. Well, we know why.
Yeah.
It's all about sex in the spring. Alrighty. This is our second, right? Of our second year Zoom talks. We have 3 live bodies here today. Can we? No, they don't want to. You don't want your picture taken, no? You're fine. All right. But 3 real people, and I don't know if anybody's tuned in as we speak. So we started this, and I totally forgot my story about the ancient Chinese story. So we have to do that today. Regina, you might have heard this at one time or another in the past, but usually when I start a gardening program, I really love this story. And it's an old ancient Chinese tale about a young man who comes of age, and he reaches that point in his life where he begins to wonder about life. And one of the questions he has is, what shall I do so I'm happy? And he kind of asks all his friends, some of his parents' friends, and one or two of them says, well, up on the mountain across the valley, way up high, there is a very old man who lives by himself in a little hut, and he is supposed to be very wise. He would probably know the answer to your question. So the young man decides to make the journey across the valley and up the mountain, and it takes all day. It's a long journey and all day. And he gets there late in the day, and sure enough, almost at the very top of the mountain is this little hut, and sitting in front of it is a very old man looking out across the valley. Have you heard this one? You don't. Okay. So the young man comes up and says, I was told that you know the answers to many things. I want to know how I should live to be happy. The old man kind of looks at him for a bit. Goes, well, go and buy a young suckling pig, roast it, invite your friends, have a party, and you'll be happy for a day. But the young man thinks, well, that is an answer, but that's not really what I'm looking for. I want to be happy for more than a day. So he finally builds up his courage and says, well, thank you, but I really would like to be happier for more than one day. And the man says, oh, well, in that case, get married and you'll be happy for a year. Which I love that one. So once again, he's not quite satisfied. A year is paying a dowry worth a year's worth of happiness. So he once again says, well, no, I really would like to, much longer than that to be happy. And then the old man says, well, then, if you would be happy forever, grow a garden. So I really do love that story, because for me, there's a lot of truth in that. Grow a garden and you'll be happy forever. And then the second brief, and I don't really know if Thomas Jefferson said this. I read somewhere that he did. Thomas Jefferson was a man of many talents and abilities, and one of them was his gardening. He was famous for that. He corresponded with people in Europe who collected seeds and sent him seeds, and he sent American seeds back to Europe. And years ago, my 2 daughters and I visited Monticello in Virginia, his home. and the gardens that had been refurbished. Is that the word? That's more like interior decorating. They did the research from the maps and tried to reestablish what had been growing there in his time. And supposedly Thomas Jefferson had said, a man in his garden never grows old. And I like that too. Although as I grow older, Regina, you can relate to this with me too. My body says, I don't know, but the mind never grows old, because gardening is a challenge. It's always something new, something different. You could study gardening your whole life and never learn all there is to know. So with that in mind, I want to mention two things before we get started. Tomorrow, which is Saturday, we are having a workshop at the Master Gardeners. What is it? Well, it's where we meet once a month, the Agricultural Building in Belmont, on growing $900 worth of food in 100 square feet, which is the size of 2 king-size beds. And I was thinking, I like to be efficient. Why have an acre if you can do it on a smaller amount of land? And also with inflation, I haven't bought vegetables in I don't know how long, and I'm sure I'd drop over dead if I went and looked at a head of lettuce or whatever. And so I'm not even sure my $900 is accurate. It might be more than that, depending on where you shop and what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, it's tomorrow, Saturday, the 25th, from 11 in the morning to 1, 2 hours. One of the master gardeners called me up this morning, and she's bringing cookies, and I'm making a chocolate cake with coconut frosting. So and who knows, maybe somebody will bring cheese and crackers, and it's free. The workshop is free. And we have some door prizes, which they're a surprise. You have to come to see what they are. Where? If you start in Alfred and go up 244 over the hill as if you were going to Belmont, it's about 12 miles, and you come to the blinking light at the edge of town in Belmont. Turn right, down past the school, it's about a mile, and on the left are 2 buildings. The one is the forestry, Allegheny County, and that's a 1-story building, I think, usually a bunch of trucks in the parking lot. And then just past it on the left, right next door to it, an old white 2-story building. And that's where the Cooperative Extension has its various offices. So that's where we'll be. Do we have Christian's email? So you're supposed to register, guys. So how can we let them know? You need to let the coordinator know that you are planning on coming, because we can really only fit in a total of 20 people. And I know 4 or 5 master gardeners are coming, so that just means like maybe 15. So she's looking up where to email Christian and let him know that you're coming. I love that map. All the counties of New York State. All right. Melanie, in case there's some new people listening in, is the head librarian here. I mean, she has another title, but I still call her the head librarian. And without Melanie, I could not do this program, because I am a dinosaur as far as the computer goes. I don't own one, and I get very aggravated. Oh, there's a picture of Christian. Okay.
His email address is cfa34@cornell.edu.
Say it again. Say it
again. cfa34@cornell.edu.
Okay. Right. So all these lovely images that you see are usually Melanie's doing. Once in a while I rope in somebody else at the library who knows how to do that. Steve Jacoby, a master gardener, gave us some images last week that maybe we'll see again. And Regina here, a bird club member who comes to my programs, I set her to work. She comes early and said, is there anything I can do? Foolish. So I said, yes, You can look up some how to build a bluebird house. This is going to mention that briefly today. So it's a many hands-on project that we have here. Plus the people that come and maybe ask questions as we go. Alrighty. In spite of my grandson complaining about me reviewing things, after 20 years of teaching college students, I have learned that reviewing is a good thing. So we'll spend 5 minutes just very briefly going over what we did at the first session 2 weeks ago when it was snowing. And that was basically, if you have a limited space, what is it you're going to grow in that limited space? You know, you're not planting an acre, so you can do everything. Right now, she hates this. Quiz time. What's one thing we spoke about to consider?
Things you like to eat.
Yes, obviously, why grow what you don't like to eat? Yeah, so that was number one. What else, Regina? You were here, I think.
Seasonal, what grows early and late.
All right, that was we got a little bit into the planning that so many people get a little spring fever. They spend a lot of time in the garden in May, which is too late. Anyway, but if you go past their garden in July, it's usually weedy. And that's it. They basically used a garden for half of the time that they could have used it because they forget about something called the second planting, usually in the middle of July. And those things then are harvested in late September through October. So we talked about that. What else?
Space.
Productivity. Okay. Obviously, if you have a tiny space, corn's out, jack-o'-lantern's out, probably potatoes are out. You need to focus on those vegetables that are very productive. Will give you a lot back for the space they are taking up. Okay, what else?
What grows in this climate?
Well, we didn't talk about that, but true, we didn't talk about growing pineapple trees. Although give another 50 years and maybe we will be. Already.
What am I missing, Mary Lou?
Okay, I'm trying to think because I didn't bring that part of the list with me.
Was there something about the cost? Like things that are cost effective?
Yes, cost effective as well as productive. Because obviously some things in the grocery stores, depending too on the time of the year, are quite expensive. So if you like, for instance, herbs. Remember my daughter, I think, brought home a very sickly looking basil. No, it was just a bunch of basil that she bought for like $5. And so look at the price of things, especially lettuce in the winter. And that would be another focus. I talked about certain things that are sprayed a lot out there in the commercial world. No matter how much you wash them, you're not going to get rid of all the poison. So if you worry about that, maybe you want to grow those things because you don't have to spray. Almost 95% of the time you don't have to spray. There was probably a few other things, but right now we're going to move on. But anyway, and it's on what? In the cloud? Where is it?
On YouTube.
On YouTube. So you can go and watch it and get all the rest of them. There were 9 different things. All righty. This time we're going to talk about siting your garden, assuming you're new. You don't have a garden yet, do you, Scott?
I have inherited a garden that has a lot of limitations,
Okay.
and it's not a vegetable garden
It's not a vegetable garden.
yet.
Okay. Are you interested maybe in a small space, like even
I have gardened in the past.
in the past?
Yeah.
Okay. And was that gardening experience out in Seattle?
I was there and then also here in Wellsville.
Okay, started here in Wellsville, then you were out in Seattle for a while? Okay, and their climate is different than ours. Although with global warming, who knows what anybody's climate is anymore, right? All right, so this in a sense needs to be like a two-pronged approach. Gardeners who are settled in and have had their garden space for years, and somebody who's new at this and is looking now right out at their lawn, which is beginning to get green, even though it's only end of March. Is your lawn green yet? Never got brown, did it?
Yeah.
And thinking, well, I'm going to dig up a bit of the lawn. Okay, so let's take a look at what you, before you do this, if you're a newcomer, what are you going to be looking for? Now, I'm just going to toss it out because I think some of you guys know the answer. If you're going to grow veggies, what does the site need?
Sunshine.
Sunshine. Most of our vegetables evolved in and then were cultivated in the sunshine. Which means a minimum of 8, better 10, 12 hours of sunshine a day. If you don't have that, there's a few things that will grow in half-day shade or dapple shade, like your spinach, maybe your lettuces, maybe your rhubarb, but you will not get the productivity out of a shady or partly shady garden. Since I don't know what to say to people who live in a wooded area or have some big trees in their yard, most people are not willing to cut the tree down or even to limit up to give more sunshine. So maybe you have to go find a community garden space. Like, I don't know, do they have that in Wellsville? They have it here, right? In Alfred, I think?
Yeah, there's a small one in Wellsville.
All righty.
There's one at that church on Trapping Brook Road.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, years ago, a member, she was only with us, Master Gardeners, for a year, but she was connected to that church, I think.
Yeah.
Okay,
They had those.
so you can find communal space. Sometimes you have to pay for it. I don't know what the deals would be. So anyway, besides sunshine, what do you need?
Water.
Let's think of the negative of water.
Not.
Do you have your
Yeah,
pictures
I
there
Yeah.
of where not to plant, make your new garden in the lawn? This is a great picture. I love this one.
I think if I
Well, she's finding it. There.
Mhm.
Can you guys see? Can you turn it around so they can see?
It might mess with the.
You guys can around see.
Yeah.
Basically, it's your front lawn with a tree or two. And either this is springtime or after a heavy rainstorm. You do not want to put your garden site here, even if the trees weren't there. Now, Allegheny County is famous for a couple of things. It was about 10,000 years ago that the glacier left, went back north, melted away. But while it was here, 7,000 feet thick, mile and a half high, it pressed down on all the soil and subsoil. So we have a very packed, tight subsoil. And there's also a lot of clay in that subsoil, which means the drainage is very poor in many parts of Allegheny County. And the glacier tended to sweep away the original topsoil. And what it left behind, we call till. And it's a mix of stones of different sizes, you're laughing, and gravel and sand and a thin, sometimes it's only a few inches up on the hilltops, maybe 4 inches only of topsoil. You're lucky if you have 12. You definitely want to avoid low spots if you decide you're going to convert part of your lawn into your vegetable garden. Okay. So what else besides sunshine and good drainage?
Is there like a tool or something that you can measure the moisture in your soil?
Yes, it's called not a tool. It's very primitive. It's called a perk test. And when I built my house almost 40 years ago now, the county sent out a fellow, I don't know what department he was in, and he did a perk test to where I could put my leach field.
Mm,
and my septic tank.
mhm,
And basically what you do is you dig a hole, maybe a foot or two deep,
mhm.
fill it up with water, see how long it takes to drain. Very, very primitive, but it works. And they have, if it takes 15 minutes, you're fine. If it takes all day, you don't put your septic or your leach field or your garden there.
Mhm.
Okay. So anyway, that's that. Now this sounds silly, but if possible, put your garden near your driveway. I didn't do that. My driveway comes in from the east side, then there's my house, and then I put the garden on the west side. And so one year, when the road crew was cleaning out the ditches, which is always a mix of the sand they've added over the winter, and they do it like every 5 or 6 or 7 years, they do the ditches,
Mhm.
and the topsoil that's eroded down in. So it's a mix of topsoil and sand. And they were cleaning the ditches in front of my house. And at that point, I wanted to expand my garden another 20 by 30 feet. I thought, I went out to the guys and said, where are you taking this? Because, they scoop it out and dump it in the dump truck. Wherever it was, they had to go dump it. I said, well, can you just take it in and dump it on my lawn here where I want my garden to be? Oh, sure. That'd be a lot quicker. They had to go across the lawn. And it was springtime.
Mm.
And the ground was wet. And you didn't realize from the distance how big a dump truck that was. So the guy said, I'll do it on my lunch hour. So the lunch hour came and the big truck came down my driveway, backing up. And got stuck
Mm.
where the French trench was from the drainage from the house, just short of where I wanted them to dump it. So that was embarrassing to me, to the driver. They had to get the town grader to pull the dump truck out of the ruts. So, and of course, that meant he dumped it on the lawn where I didn't really want it. So my girlfriend Cindy and I, for a week or two, wheelbarrowed it over to where we wanted it to be. So if you garden, that's a long story for the lesson, right? If you can, near your driveway, because you're going to be bringing in leaves in the fall, maybe for mulching or added topsoil or whatever, manure.
Sir.
Yeah, so if it's near a driveway, it's much easier.
Is there any negative effects with like the salt that they put on the road if you were to like include that in your
Ah.
garden?
I'm thinking, once again, they do this every 6 years,
Okay.
and salt pretty much leaches out right
Oh,
away.
okay.
So my guess is that there wasn't that much salt in
Okay.
it. And I didn't use it for a year. What I did was I spread it 6 inches on the lawn, and then put some hay down because I didn't want weeds to grow in it,
Mhm.
and it just sat there for a year. And then that killed the sod underneath.
Mhm.
But I did spend a couple of years picking out the gravel. There's no free lunch. No free lunch. Alrighty. You said something about water source.
Mhm.
Once again, hoses usually come in 50-foot lengths.
Mhm.
2 hoses is probably, if you get beyond 100 feet on a
Mhm.
hose, it becomes cumbersome
Mhm.
and you lose water pressure. So once again, either most houses have an outdoor faucet,
Mhm.
usually, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Some people maybe even have one all the way out to wherever their garden is, but that's also in consideration. And you really, if you have a lot of land, you know what? The garden 1,000 feet away, the deer will just love that. Oh yeah, it's not even near the house. We don't have to worry. And I know this sounds silly, but who wants to walk 1,000 feet one way to go get a handful of something for dinner?
Mhm.
Or take that 5-minute bug patrol, which if it's right near the house, you're more likely to do. All right. Okay. Any questions on siding that I have forgotten before we move on to very briefly?
Should you take into consideration, like in-laws, well, I have neighbors on both sides of me. Should I take into consideration things that they might be growing or things that they might have happening in their yards? in relation to pests and
Oh.
pollination and things.
Mhm. Once in Kentucky, we lived on 3 acres, but it was in like a subdivision along a 2-lane
Mhm.
highway. Everybody had 3 to 4 acres. And I had some ducks that roamed free, pretty much in my yard,
Mhm.
probably over the neighbors a little bit in their lawn in the back. And when the neighbors sprayed their lawn with poison
Mhm.
or whatever bugs, it killed 2 of my ducks who were, eating the
Mhm.
foliage and the bugs. So if your neighbors aren't considerate and they do some spraying, they really have to be careful what the wind is doing so that their herbicide doesn't blow across and kill your vegetable garden,
Mhm. Mhm.
things like that. Also, the more you have of something, whether it's pumpkins or potatoes, the more likely the bugs are going to find it.
Mhm.
And so if your neighbor grows lots of potatoes year after year, maybe they're going to have Colorado potato beetles.
Mhm.
And then you plant your 5 little hills and they're going to come
Yeah.
over the line. Yeah, neighbors. A mixed blessing. Okay. Alrighty. Next time, we're going to talk about amending your little space so that you can make it even more productive. So we won't go there today, but I do want to. It's that time of year, and on a day like today, and the last few days, it's been almost up to 50 on the hilltop. So I think it's even warmer down in the valley. And you just want to get out there and start doing things. And as I jump up and down and yell, do not walk in your wet garden. She looks guilty. What have you been doing, honey?
I am not watching my wet garden.
Okay, and don't dig in it either, because especially if you have a fairly high clay content, you're an architect, if you want to build with adobe, fine. Go out there and work in your garden and make mud bricks, because that's what you'll be doing if you go dig in your clay-y, especially garden. So you have to restrain yourself. Which all gets back, everybody hates me for this, but guys, if you had a garden, you should have done all of this last October, when usually the weather is dry-ish around here. With climate change, things are changing, but still September and October tend to be drier months usually, and the soil is just right. By the way, quiz. Regina, what's the difference between dirt and soil? You know.
No, not really.
Anybody? We haven't gotten to the rumor yet, Jackie. Don't let me forget you. She's the other new librarian, and she gets in on this sometimes if she's not too busy at the desk. Well, I always used to call it dirt, and everybody would scowl at me in Master Gardeners. Dirt's dirt, but if you have soil, it's only 1/2 dirt,
Mhm.
and the other half is half and half.
Microorganisms.
Compost.
Before those,
Oh, nitrogen, oxygen,
air
air.
and water. So soil is a mixture. It's only half dirt, and the other half is half air, aerated, loose, friable, and water. Because without water, there is no life. Water allows the nutrients in the soil to be absorbed by the roots and used by the plants. So where was I going with this? Oh, and one of the advantages of getting your garden ready in the fall is the amount of moisture in the soil is just right. So if you still spade or till, we have to go off on a side here in a minute and talk about that. You need to do it in October. However, and I tell you, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. It really is true. one of the joys for me in gardening was every October I would go and, well, I used to spade up to a depth of about 12 inches by hand, the whole garden, 1,000 square feet. And then as I got older, one year, I thought, why am I spading up the paths? That's stupid.
Mm.
So that was when I started taking a couple of inches from the path, putting it on top of what I call the bed or the row, thus raising up the row and filling in what became a trench with lots of
Mhm.
leaves to bring it up to level. So that was one step. And then places like Cornell, which basically was an agricultural school here, more than 100 years old. One of the 4 agricultural state colleges in the state. They're the ones that do all the research. Now, Aunt Tilly's hang out the soap and the deer won't eat the apple trees may or may not be true, because Aunt Tilly didn't do scientific research where she did it for 100 trees over 10 years, and lo and behold, never did any deer come in and eat up the apple tree. That is a scientific experiment that is based on research over a length of time, over a great variety. So anyway, their new research suggests or even says, do not spade, do not till. Because what's happening, let's say you have 12 inches of topsoil. It's like a high-rise condominium. At different levels, different organisms live. And each group of organisms, whether it's the earthworms, the nematodes, or the I call them bugs.
Mhm.
I don't know much about etymology. Etymology, is that the word for the study of bugs?
Mhm.
Okay. They all do their thing at different levels. And together, it's a living community that helps create your soil by essentially taking any organic matter that happens to fall on the surface. Think of the dead red squirrel that I trapped. It was under the house. Or the bird, or the leaves, or even the dead worms. Mother Nature gradually, usually within a year, decays all that matter, and it's incorporated into the soil, usually by the earthworms, and makes all those nutrients available for plant growth. And when you go in there with your tiller, especially, or your spading fork, and one of the few things I feel guilty about is once in a blue moon in October, I'll dig up a toad. And maybe this spading fork will have pierced it. And then I have to kill it because it's not going to live. And I hate that. But anyway, that was always a part of what happens in the fall, because by October, the toads are going down for their winter big sleep. To quote Raymond Chandler. Now they're saying you shouldn't do that. So I've come up with a compromise. So in October, I go out there with my, usually a hay fork, which has longer, thinner tines. And I just stick it down about 8 inches or so in my row and wiggle it around. This is after I've added any kind of compost from the compost heap, maybe an inch if I have enough to go on the rows. Usually in October, there's only about an inch left of the leaves that I put on earlier in the summer as a mulch. So I just wiggle the soil, loosen it up a bit. And even though I've tried not to walk on the rows, keep your feet in the path. And so that's what I do now. I don't usually flip it over. Or if I can't resist and have to flip it a little bit, I only flip the top 2 or 3 inches. And then I leave it rough. Because what happens with the frost or the freeze thaw cycle in the wintertime or in the fall and then in the spring? Water in the soil, expands when it's frozen on, say like last night, it got down to 30. So
Mhm.
everything on the surface froze again. That crumbles up because it expands, and so the
Mhm.
soil around it is. So if you go out in your garden now and you loosely had turned just a few inches in the fall, everything is like the clumps are gone. They've all
Mhm.
crumbled apart. And now there's lots of airspace, a lot of space for moisture. It's soft and friable.
What do you mean by friable?
That's a word. You remind me of my Turkish roommate in college. What does that mean, Mary Lou? Friable means loose and not compacted. I think that's a good, probably a
Okay,
general definition.
okay.
Okay. Unlike what's going to happen if you walk on your wet soil, then you have mud brick. You've squished all the air out. Okay. Time have we got to keep track of the time here?
12:07.
Okay. Next time, we're going to talk about amending this little garden plot you have. What shall I add and how shall I deal with it to make it even better? But that's next time. So let's talk about um if you want to get an early start. And the other thing I harangue about is in this area, the common knowledge is you plant your garden when?
After Memorial Day.
Hey, and I want to scream, no, no, no. Not for all your early stuff. Like what?
Lettuce,
Lettuce,
spinach.
spinach,
Peas.
peas, which we aren't going to grow because they take up too much room, but peas, yes.
But they taste so good.
I know. That's why you have to maybe do more than just 100 square feet. Radishes, broccoli, and onions for another reason. We'll talk about beets, carrots. All those things love the cool weather, which, by the way, it's getting harder and harder for us to do that anymore. It used to be in Allegheny County. We were zone 4. So the frost really did come on the average around the 21st of May, around Memorial Day. But now, but then you had May and June were beautiful here years ago. Cool weather. If you were lucky haying, it didn't rain too much in late May and early June, you could get your hay in. But now the heat waves come early. Things like broccoli, lettuce, peas, they don't like it when it gets above 75. So it's even more important to get these early vegetables in early when they will grow best and taste best. And broccoli, for instance, if you can harvest broccoli by the middle of June before it gets really hot, it's amazingly how much sweeter it tastes than if it's July and it's already 90 degrees out there.
Oh, the hot weather makes it a bit more bitter.
Better. And both go to seed.
Mm.
Okay, so where am I? So I've already sown indoors my tomato plants, which aren't going to go out till the middle of May, but I like to get them good sized for that. Get a jump on the season. My broccoli is only about this high, but that's okay. It's going to go out in about 4 weeks. What else? And my onions. We'll get to the onions in a minute. What have I got scribbled out here? Okay, well, Regina sucked me into talking about onions a little bit last time, but I want to do it again this time because I think it's important. I was going to bring one of my onions from the fridge and forgot. A 4-inch Patterson onion that I grew last year and harvested in probably the first week in October. And it's been in the fridge since, 40 degrees, and it's still hard. It's probably good for another month before I have to make onion soup with whatever's left over and freeze it. Who knows anything about onions? Long day, short day. What's going on there? Day neutral. Okay. My I won't mention names. One of my friends last night at discussion group said, I've just never had any luck with growing onions. Well, onions are funny. Depending on where they evolved in the world, think of the earth, the equator. The further you go, and we're going to forget the South Pole, the further you go north, in the winter, the nights are long, but in the summer, the days are long, right? My one daughter lives down in San Diego, which is about 15 degrees difference than here, and she bemoans the fact that the days and nights aren't that different down there
Mm.
compared to here. If she comes visits in June, it doesn't really get dark till 10 o'clock at night.
Mhm.
That's not true in San Diego because they're closer to the equator. Long day, short day. So depending on the variety of onions, if you're going to grow onions here at roughly 41 degrees north, you need long day. Because in June and July, our days are 14, 15 hours long, sunshine. And that's when the onion plant will start making its bulb in late June through July. But in order to do that and get full size, it has to have a good root system by then.
Mm.
So if you just wait until late April to plant your onion seeds, the plant's not going to be big enough come June to do its thing. And you will not get the 4 or 5 inch bulbs that you might want. So that's why I start my seeds indoors in early March, transplant out the babies, which are maybe like that, and usually the 3rd week in April. Some people want to buy onion sets.
Mm.
I used to do that 40 some years ago. And then, I don't know, I'm going to say 20, 25 years ago, something happened. And the sets no longer produced big bulbs. You'd get maybe 2-inch bulbs, and that's it. They would not grow any bigger. And finally, no, I didn't. I put it together myself, why that is. About 20 or 25 years ago, agribusiness began buying up the old 100-year-old nurseries that they've been in the family 3, 4 generations. They started out with great grandpa back in the 18 whatevers. Those families knew what they were doing. They cared about their product, and you got a good end result. Agribusiness, I'm sorry, guys, does not care except for the money that they can make. And so they're not keeping the onion, your sets, if you still buy them, were grown in the fall, stored in a warehouse at a certain temperature over the winter, and then sold to you in the spring. But they're not keeping them at the proper temperature because it costs more money. That's my theory. And so I don't bother with them anymore because they don't give me what I want. So if you really love your onions, and not everybody does, but if you really love your onions, one of the things last time we talked about was variety. And I told the story about buying peaches for canning up in Naples. And they had a young girl there helping out a few years ago. And they had a couple of bushels, different kinds of peaches. Obviously, they were different varieties, but they weren't labeled for some reason. Usually they label. So I asked her, what kind of peaches are these? Regina, do you remember the answer? Or you weren't here?
She said yellow.
Yeah, she looked at them, she looked at me, she looked back at the basket and said, well, they're yellow. Which is the state of affairs. Sorry, young people. You just don't know enough, or care enough, or think it's all the same. And it's not all the same. So for me, I love 3 kinds of onions. The sweet Spanish, and I get the sweet Georgia brown. I love the name of that as a type of sweet Spanish, a Walla Walla. And they are sweet. And if you want on your hamburgers in the summertime or raw in your salad, they're the way to go, but they don't keep. See, there's nothing that's perfect. So you have to thin them out during every other one during July and August, September. And then the ones you harvest just before heavy frost in October, you have to eat up by probably Thanksgiving, because they're not gonna keep longer than that. And then I love the Red Wing. Which you found a nursery, you think,
In New York.
okay. All right, Regina did some research for me last week and I haven't gotten the information yet. The reason I love Red Wing is not only is it that beautiful, deep bronzy red on the outside, but when you slice it, the red and the white and the red concentric circles all the way to the middle. Some red onions are only red on the outside and then they're white in the middle. That's kind of like a cheat, I think. So Red Wings. Now, that lasts till, if you keep them properly, 40 degrees in your storeroom or in the bottom of the fridge, they'll last to Valentine's Day. And then you want what is called a keeper. You know, like the good guy you're going to marry, he's going to be a keeper. Well, that's a Patterson, and that's a hybrid. Well, these are all hybrids, I guess. And that's still in my fridge and pretty rock hard, and usually lasts till about May, which is fine because come July, the new onions are ready to start thinning out.
You must have a big refrigerator.
No, but the two drawers at the bottom can fit 24, probably 50 onions in both of them. So, I mean, I don't eat tons of onions, but probably 2 a week. Okay, so we touched on varieties. Let me mention tomatoes again. Do we have that picture of the what was it, Jetstar tomato?
I don't think we do.
Oh, we did. Oh, that's right. We just had the paper picture and I didn't. Okay. That's okay. In your mind's eye, keep your brain growing and alive. Tomatoes come in, wow. You have grape tomatoes and cherry tomatoes and slicing tomatoes and plum tomatoes if you make your own sauce, right? But you also have two different kinds of growth patterns. One's a determinate tomato. They'll grow 3-4 feet high, and that's it. And they tend to produce their tomatoes all at once over maybe a 3-week period. When we had a shorter growing season, that's what you grew here in Allegheny County, but otherwise you wouldn't get any tomatoes at all. But the indeterminate type, like Jack's beanstalk, until the frost gets them, just keeps going. And this one that we had, unfortunately, we don't have it on the screen. Jetstar, my daughter planted it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 years ago. And we had to, in August, it was already over 6 feet. I need another pole, it said. So we stuck up a 7-foot pole. And come late September, it was still growing and still making tresses of the cherry-sized tomatoes, where you'd have 15 tomatoes on a tress. Is that what it's called? Like hair tresses? And it was still flopping over at the top. And I thought, middle of September, the frost is coming, and I got the scissors out and I just chopped off the top of it. And so then all the energy went into ripening what was there before the hard freeze. And what was interesting is, we'll get to frost maybe next time, the cold air sinks. So when that first frost came, the bottom 1.5 foot of that 7-foot tall tomato plant, the leaves died off, but the top was still growing because it was above 32 degrees up there. Okay. So if you want to save space, that was another one of our things last week, is go vertical if you can. Green beans can grow on a bush or they can grow on a pole. So it's like your city has a certain population, skyscrapers in Chicago 100-some years ago. So you can,
Mediums now.
yeah, condominiums now. Okay, so that's our tomato. Oh, and broccoli. Now that we don't have cool Junes anymore, what I've decided to do, broccoli also is a plant that attracts those little green worms. I simply plant more broccoli early and harvest the head sometime in June. and forget about letting it grow through July. Most broccolis, if you do that, you behead it, and then it continues to grow and send up sprouts, little heads along the side of the stem. And that most broccoli varieties will do that. I don't know, through maybe past July. The bugs, I usually by the middle of July pull my broccoli up in the old days. Now I'm just planting twice as much early. And once I harvest the head, I forget it. I just pull it up. Not gonna treat the green worms to more food. And then I can plant something else in that space in like early July for a later harvest. So, and it tastes better in June anyway. Alrighty. How are we doing on time?
You have about 9 minutes.
9 minutes. Okay. Before I forget then, the next 2 sessions, which will get us into April, oh my, is what to add to your soil to raise it up and why you want to raise it up and how to do that and what to add, things like that. And then frost, the ins and outs of frost, what different kinds of frost that we have. How can you trick Mother Nature if you want to get an early start on some things? So, what do you do to be able to put things out earlier than you would normally? And keep an eye out on the weather, okay? And 2 more things then to talk about. Regina looked up the birds. I suddenly decided my bluebirds are back checking out the house. The robins, a whole bunch of robins showed up this morning. They're heading north, but maybe one's been around, so that one probably will nest again. By the way, people who aren't into birds, same robin comes back. Same tree swallows come back to the same spot they were born. Now, isn't that clever? How do they know? They must have a map in their head. They're flying north. Oh, I recognize that house. I recognize that pond. And there's my house that I was born in. They do. I'm not exactly sure how, but they know. So if you want help in your garden with the bugs, so you don't have to spray, let the birds do it. Put up 2 or 3 bird houses. And Regina, why don't you tell us where they can find this information, and you can speak up so they can hear you?
There's a great website, Cornell University has how to build a birdhouse, and it has all different dimensions for different kinds of birds that you might want to attract. The dimensions are for the hole in the side of the birdhouse. It says 1 and 9/16 is the smallest hole size they can fit into. So
Let's talk. Do the 1.5 for the bluebirds or the tree swallows?
oh yes,
You really don't want to attract an owl because he's going to eat up your birds that eat up the bugs. All right, so we're not building an owl house. Sorry, unless you have 10 acres and you whatever, build it way back away from your garden. But if you're into, for me, it's the bluebirds and the tree swallows, because I live with a 10-acre meadow and some ponds, and then a 10-acre woods behind me, and it's amazing how certain birds, especially during the breeding season, when they're raising their young, think a 15-year-old boy and what they go through. You have a son, right?
I don't.
Oh, you don't? What about you got? How much did he eat when he was 15?
I had 2 of them and they were in sports and they ate a lot.
Not exactly. One year I had a pair of Phoebes build on the back of my house, and it's from the house across the grass to the woods. A Norway spruce row was 15 feet, and then the house and the garden was 80 feet. And when those Phoebes hatched out 5 babies, there was not a flying insect in that 15-foot by 80-foot strip, because they just cleaned them all up. And the tree swallows and the bluebirds will nest in the houses that Regina looked up on a 4 to 6 foot pole out around the garden. So there's lots of information.
Is there anything that you have to do to attract the bird to the house, or it'll just find it?
They'll find it. It might possibly take them a year, but
Okay.
when I put these houses up
Mhm.
within a week or two or three, they found them.
Hmm.
In Kentucky, my husband put together a kit for Purple Martins. Yeah, Purple Martin house, and the Purple Martins like to live in condominiums, like maybe 12 pairs in one house. And we had like a 20-foot pole, so they're up in the air. And 1 year, and they colonized it. And then we took it down in the winter and cleaned it out. And we didn't get it back up early enough. And one day at around 10 in the morning, I hear this Purple Martins make a chirp, chirp, chirp noise. And here were like 3 or 4 of them flying around the pole.
Oh.
Where is it? I know this is where we were born. Why isn't this out here? And I called up my husband down at the yard, and he was in the oil business. And he came home and put the house up, and they immediately moved in. So they knew.
Is there a certain distance that you should have it from your garden, or it doesn't matter?
It does no, but if 50 feet apart for similar houses,
Okay.
and then what will happen is 2 bluebirds won't usually nest 50 feet away from each other. It's the competition. Bluebirds eat differently than, say, the tree swallows, which are the ones that I have. But a tree swallow will nest 50 feet away from a bluebird.
Mm-hmm.
So I have about 4 or 5 houses out there.
Okay.
And I have the pond. They love, especially the tree swallows. They're like the Air Force. Zip in and get a drink of water on the fly. It's really fun to watch. Okay. Do we have time for our recipes?
Yes, you have
Yeah.
3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Mhm.
All right. We decided we would do recipes, and then what did I do? I forgot.
forgot.
Forgot. So we'll at least do, can we show the picture of the chives?
Yes, we can.
Chives are perennial. And I have them growing in my herb garden. And basically you eat the green stems. You cut them off and snip them up. There we go. Do we have a picture then of the flowers?
Mhm.
Okay. We're getting there. You can also shred the flowers in your salad. Now, I haven't done that. My daughter has. Oh, aren't they beautiful? They are beautiful. So, member of the onion family, they like lots of sunshine. I suppose you could pull up and eat the tiny little bulbs as well, but I never do. But they're the first thing in the garden that comes up, and I'm expecting by Easter in 2 weeks, I'll have my cream cheese and chive sandwich. First recipe of the spring from the garden. And I make my own bread. So toast up a slice of whatever, rye bread would be great. Spread with cream cheese. Take the scissors, snip, 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 snip. And since we have another minute, rhubarb that's coming up. So let's look at the rhubarb. Ah. And do we have the flower stalk?
Mhm.
That's what you want to cut off. With perennials, you're not interested in producing seeds, especially if they're hybrids, because the seeds won't come true. You want all the energy to go into the plant, to the roots and the crown. So next year you have an early productive harvest. So come June, usually, a rhubarb plant, which will take up at least 4 feet in diameter, circle, will send up 1 or 2 or 3 seed stalks. You just get your shears out and just cut them off close to the ground. Don't pull them, just cut them off. Do we have time for rhubarb recipes, or shall we wait?
Yeah, you have a minute left.
Jackie, do you have a minute? We're up to the last minute. You want to talk about your rhubarb butter?
Oh, sure.
This is the other librarian and her, what was it, your father, grandfather? Uncle, who liked the rhubarb?
Oh, it's my brother-in-law. My
Brother-in-law.
brother-in-law absolutely loves rhubarb, and he's the only person in the house that likes it. So I tend to gather up as much as I can, and I make a bunch of rhubarb butter.
I didn't do that.
Yeah, people really don't know what it is, but it's a tasty spread for pancakes or toast or pretty much anything you'd want to sweeten up. So it's really quite simple. It's about a pound of rhubarb, and if you're chopping it up, it's about 4 cups.
Okay.
A half a cup of honey, a juice of 1 lemon, and a 1/4 cup of water. And I'd like to
No
take,
butter?
no, it's not butter at all. It's,
All right.
it's like apple butter. Apple butter also doesn't really have butter in it, but it's used for a spread, so they call it
But
butter.
you have to be careful it doesn't scorch on your pot, right?
You're right. And this recipe says to use a saucepan, and I say don't do that. Use a Dutch oven because it has that enamelware, so the heat is spread out. And
Or a
just-
copper bottom.
Yes.
Or a heavy bottom.
and also don't walk away from it because it will scorch.
And it will boil over
Yes.
and make a mess on you.
So essentially, after you mix your ingredients together, I use hot water because it dissolves the honey faster, so it's nice and integrated. You set it on medium high heat, and then when it starts to boil, you're going to turn it right down,
Yep.
and you're going to
Low.
let that, yes,
And stir.
yep, stir and stir and stir, and you'll want to do that for about 25 minutes, and then you turn it down really low, and you
Uh-huh.
keep watching it for about 2 hours until it thickens to about the consistency of where you'd stop applesauce,
Okay.
because it will continue to thicken as it cools.
You see why people don't do this anymore.
I do because
Really?
and my daughter really likes rhubarb also. It's a good way
Yeah.
to preserve it.
Yes.
You can preserve this. You can it in the water bath method
Mhm.
for 10 minutes.
Or just freeze it.
Yeah, you can freeze it.
freeze it.
It's good in your refrigerator for up to 2 weeks.
Okay, we can put that on.
Yes.
All righty. I think we're more or less out of time, right? Okay. Well. Right, what can we say? Spring is almost here. Do I dare say that? We'll have another 4 inches of icy snow.
Oh, yeah.